Hello, today is November 30th, and we are reading our psalm for this week, the second Sunday of Advent. Our psalm for this week is not from the book of Psalms, but from Luke, chapter 1, verses 68 through 79. Blessed are you, Lord, the God of Israel. You have come to your people and set them free. You have raised up for us a mighty Savior, born of the house of your servant David. Through your holy prophets you promised of old to save us from our enemies, from the hands of all who hate us, to show mercy to our forebears and to remember your holy covenant. This was the oath you swore to our father Abraham, to set us free from the hands of our enemies, free to worship you without fear, holy and righteous before you all the days of our life. And you, child, shall be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare the way, to give God's people knowledge of salvation by the forgiveness of their sins. In the tender compassion of our God, the dawn from on high shall break upon us, to shine on those who dwell in darkness and in the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the way of peace. So, as I said before, this selection from Luke is not from the book of Psalms. It is our psalm for this Sunday, but if our definition of psalm is a religious song or religious poetry, pertaining to God and what God has done, then this section of Luke from the Gospels fits the bill. In fact, we are going to, through the rest of our Advent season, be reading our Psalms from the book of Luke. So why do we do that? Luke has, in the first chapter, three different, I've seen the term canticle used. Canticle is another just term that basically means song of praise. But I think psalm also works as a definition or a term to describe that there are three different songs that are used in this first chapter of Luke, or the first couple of chapters of Luke. And those three songs are this first one, which is the Song of Zechariah. Zechariah is singing it in praise of what God has done through the upcoming birth of his son John with his wife Elizabeth, John the Baptist, who will become the baptizer in the wilderness, who is the theme, who we are talking about in our gospel this week. So Zechariah, this is Zechariah's song. The other two songs are Mary's much more famous song, the Magnificat, and then the Song of Simeon, which is another song of praise. And all of them pertain to the coming of children. Zechariah's is pertaining both to John, his son, who he knows will be the forerunner of Jesus. And also, Zechariah has some inkling, clearly in this song, of who Jesus will be. And Mary's song is about the coming of Jesus, about the turning of the world. And Simeon's song is another song of praise as he holds the baby Messiah in his arms. So we have these three songs. Luke begins with song. And so because this is the year of Luke, we have to read them. And they are a beautiful supplement to our worship. So, and further, I think these psalms, these three songs in the first chapter of Luke, those three songs are pulling on a tradition. Luke is fully aware of the tradition of Israel, the literature of Israel, and in some ways, the songs of Luke are takes, developments on what has come before. I think this song from Zechariah is like Hannah's song, and Mary's song is also like Hannah's song in 1 Samuel. Hannah is a mother who cannot give birth. She has been unable to have children, and so she is deeply affected by this, and she goes and prays to God. And in the course of her prayer, God answers it and gives her a son, Samuel, who she dedicates to the temple. Hannah's song, in response to what God does, is a song about the blessings of God, God's faithfulness through the prophets to the people, God's covenant to Abraham. Hannah, in the course of her joy, connects the blessings of her child to the blessings of her people, the history of God's faithfulness. And here in Zechariah does the same thing. He's about to receive a boy. He and Elizabeth are older parents. It's indicated that they have not had children so far. So you see there are parallels with Elizabeth and Hannah, and if you go further back, Elizabeth and Sarah, who is an older woman who gives birth to a boy, the boy Isaac, who becomes the next generation that will lead to the founding of the nation of Israel. These parallels matter. Mary giving birth as the virgin birth ties her to these women throughout Israel's history. There's an ongoing story of God coming to hopelessness and making wondrous things happening by virtue of God's action alone. And Zechariah then turns after verse 75. He turns from this song, which is so like those other songs of Hannah's song and Sarah's response to God's faithfulness. He turns in verse 76, and you, child. So it's as if he is turning from God to the child still in the womb. And he's talking to John. You will be the prophet, and you will go before the Lord to prepare the way. What an intent understanding of who John will be. And then he connects the birth of his son, the ministry of his son, his still unborn son. He connects it to the image in Isaiah. In verse 79, it says, to shine on those who dwell in darkness and in the shadow of death. And you can't help but hear a reference, a connection of who John will be to Isaiah 9, verse 2. Isaiah 9, verse 2. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. And that passage in Isaiah goes further to talk about a child has been born for us. And that Isaiah 9 gets read all the time in our Advent settings. Gets read frequently at Christmas. It's in our Christmas Eve service this year. And so Zechariah is connecting the prophets and the history of Israel, the entire history of his people, blessed by God in their darkest times, in which God has come to them. God's faithfulness is not just about God does things for them, but God dwells among the people. And so Zechariah's song is both a remembering of the faithful past and a looking to the future in times of trouble with hope and with gratitude for what God has done and what God is doing. That's all for today. I hope you are having a great week. All right. Bye-bye.